Good evening. Hope all of you are doing well. Maseches Yevamos Daf Kuf Ches and Kuf Tes Amud Aleph. We'll be going to the Mishnah, which is about 2/3, a little bit more than 2/3 of the way down on Kuf Tes Amud Aleph. As you can tell, the Amud Aleph here on Kuf Ches is long, Kuf Tes Amud Aleph is long, and the blot for Shabbos, which will be Kuf Tes Amud Beis and Kuf Yud, all of those are still long, but they're not as wide as the blot that we're going to be learning tonight. We're starting at a fresh Mishnah. And that is the Mishnah on the bottom of Kuf Zayin Amud Beis. Let's jump right in. What type of ketana? What is the scenario in which a young girl would have to do miyun? The halacha is that if a mother and brother were to say, hey, listen, your father has died, and therefore we have the rights to marry you off, that has to be a scenario where the mother and brother are the ones who are creating the marriage. Because had it been that the father was alive, then the father would be able to enact a marriage on behalf of his daughter that has d'oraisa status, and then miyun does not work. Miyun only works in a case where a girl is married off to another person by a mother and or brother. And if they never told her, she could just literally walk away. She doesn't have to do miyun. What do you mean you married me to someone? Non-starter. She has to know about it. Reb Chanina ben Antigonus Omer called Tinoka she'enu yochala lishmor kiddusheha. Any girl who is so young that she doesn't know how to be shomer the kiddushin ein tzricha l'mayim. You give her a diamond ring and she flushes it down the toilet for fun. That's not kiddushin. That's a little nothing. She's a child. You give someone a pencil. You give someone a trinket. If she doesn't know that there's a chashivus to it, it's insufficient, and therefore nothing gets off the ground. It's a zero. And still more broadly, Rabbi Lazar Omer ein ma'aseh ketana klum ela kimefute, that the anything that happens with a katana is considered to be nothing. It's really considered to be like a mafuteh, like she was basically violated. That's kind of how we look at what's happening there. There certainly is no kiddushin, and at a very young age, there is no miyun. So much so, says the Gemara, 5 lines from the bottom on Kuf Zayin Amud Beis, that Bas Yisrael, the Kohen, normally when a Bas Yisrael marries a Kohen, she's allowed to have truma. But here, because the marriage that was done to the child, to a very young child, is so irrelevant, lo sochal the truma, she's not even allowed to eat truma. And the reverse is also true. Bas Kohen Yisrael, a Bas Kohen who normally loses her rights to truma when she's married to Yisrael, tocha, but she's still allowed to eat nothing. It's a little. She's 5 years old. Nothing gets off the ground. It doesn't count. Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov Omer kol akva shehi mina ish. Any. This is we'll have to get to this in the Gemara, but by virtue of the fact that she's in a marriage because of him, we'll see what this means. Then ki'ilu hi ishto, it's as if they're married, and then miyun is required. Kol akva she'ena mina ish, if she's connected to him, not by him, but by something external, so then ki'ilu ena ishto, and then no miyun is required. We'll get to that in the Gemara. 3 lines from the bottom, Kuf Zayin Amud Beis, the Gemara opens up as follows. Amar Rav Yehuda, the Amrei la b'masnisa tana. It was either Rav Yehuda. Yehuda, remember, was the Talmud of both Rav and Shmuel, so he's a pretty early Amora, 2nd century Amora. But we weren't sure, says the Gemara. Some say that it's actually a Mishnah. So this is a fascinating historical insight. We're not sure if this is a Brisa from the Tanaim, or if this is a Memra from the Amoraim. And they're nafkaminas in regards to halacha. When this is your marimakom, it's nafkaminas. But anyways, this was just like a brief period in history where the Amoraim weren't sure about how information flowed. What was this information of either of Yehuda or the Brisa? But Rishona Hayu Kosman Get Miyun, they used to write a Get Miyun, and here's what it would say. Lo Re'ina, I don't want you. Lo Re'ina Bey, she doesn't want him. Lo Tzvina Bey, I don't desire you. V'leis Ana Baili Hisnas Balei, and I don't want to marry him. However, that was somewhat wordy, says the Gemara. Kevan dechazu denafish tibura. Since we see that there are a lot of words here, therefore, Amrei, as we turn to the top of Kuf Ches Amud Aleph, Asilich Lufu Begita, we were concerned that maybe they would mix this up with a get, and that would be very problematic. Therefore, takinu hachi, it therefore has to say in the get, miyun b'yom ploni, on this day, miyana plonis bas ploni be'anpana, that this girl did miyun in front of us. Be'anpana means in front of us. Says the Gemara, seemingly about 108 blot too late. The Gemara says, Tana Rabbanon Ezehu Miyun. We're talking about Miyun. We're knee deep in Miyun. We don't even know what Miyun is. What actually is the mechanics of Miyun? So says the Gemara, here's what's happened. Amra, if she says, Ifshi beploni bali, I don't want to be with this man who is my husband, or Ifshi bekidushin shekidshuni ami v'achi, or imi v'achi, I don't want to accept this kiddushin that my mother and brother put me through, and even more, yeser al kain, even more dramatic. Amar Rabbi Yehuda afilu yosheves ba'apirion, she's sitting in the kala's chair. And she even left her father's house and went to her husband's house. And then she says, I don't want to be married to this man. Sufficient. Marriage is over. Yeser al kain, still more dramatic. What?
So what do we do about dinner?
Wait, just wait. We're gonna get there. Yeser al Kain. Amar Rabbi Yehuda afilu hayu orchen mesubin beveis baila. Even if she was serving dinner in her husband's house, and she's literally serving them drinks. And she says to the guests, I hate my husband. That's done. Unbelievable. The standards of miyun are so far away from get. It is incredible. The halachos of gittin are so rigid and so technical. The klaf and gimel and tes is 12, and there's 12 lines, and so much Torah. But you have to say v'nasan biyod. That has to be in her rishus. What if it's halfway there? All these shilas. But here the miyun is so lightweight. What?
This is only until she's 12.
Correct.
Okay. No,
Just saying. The Gemara is going to discuss what?
Practical applications.
What? Oh, yeah. Not very practical at the moment, I hope. Yes. Yeser al Kain, still more extreme, even a bigger chiddush. Amar Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. Afilu shigra ba'alei tzol chenveni lahavi lo chayfetz mishalo. He says to his to this girl, half wife, whatever she is, go to the store, please, and go pick something up for me. V'amra, and she says to the store, and she beploni baili. I wish I wasn't married to this guy. Says the Gemara, in l'chamiyun gadol mizeh. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. It's such a gentle line. She basically says, I'm not interested, and the whole thing ends. Unbelievable. However, it has to be the Fnei Shlosha. That we saw yesterday, and I think yesterday, the day before, I can't remember anymore. Third of the way down, quarter of the way down, although it only feels like we're 3 lines down because of how big the Gemara is, and we are at the 2 dots. And the Gemara says, quoting the Shita of Reb Chanina ben Antigonus Omer Kol Tinokes, as we said, that anyone who's not able to be Shomer's Kedushin, she doesn't know how to protect that which she received for Kedushin, then the whole thing's a 0. Amar Reb Yehuda Amar Shmuel Halacha Reb Chanina ben Antigonus, we paskin like him. Tana the Brisa writes, Tana Shalom Miana, let's say that there was a girl. She didn't do me into her first husband. She really liked another guy. Va'am Davani says, and she marries another guy. So let's say that Ruvain, whatever, it's Kiddushin Darabana, it doesn't matter. Don't worry about the technicalities here. So the Gemara says she was quasi married, but Kiddush Yevamos, she was quasi married to Chaim, and she's like, you know what, Yaakov's better. Mishum Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Amru Nisueha Hein Miuneha. Wow. Her marriage, by virtue of the fact that she was a Mekabel, either Kiddushin or Nisuin will be done in the Gemara, by virtue of the fact that she married another guy, that was the miyun. In other words, the miyun doesn't have to be a proactive step. It can be an implied step, which is crazy. No? At least in the previous Gemara, we were saying she has to say EF she beploni baili. It's an absent meal.
You're right. It's clear, but it's clear. I mean, it's a right of rule.
It is. I'm bothered by the lack of formality. Like I.
It's passive.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. In the first section of the Gemara, the Bryce at the top, we said in all the cases she said ef she beploni bali. She's not doing that. She literally turns around. She's like, would you like to get married? And she proposed this to the guy. He's like, I read Mekudeshesli. It's crazy. So then the Gemara says, well, what kind of marriage did she propose? What was going on here? What if it was only Kiddushin? She's halachically somewhat quasi-married to Chaim, and then she only does Kiddushin to Yaakov. Same svara, that we don't have to actually say Yefshi Beploni Baili, it just works. The question was asked as follows: do we say Pliga Rabbanan Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Olo? Are there any dissenting opinions against Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira? And if you want to say that there are those who are dissenting opinions on Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, is it B'Kiddushin or Afilu ben Nisuin? Where do they argue? Is it by Kiddushin and or Nisuin? If you want to say that, even if you want to say that they're arguing even by Nisuin, halacha kamoso in regards to Nisuin, or in halacha kamoso, we don't know how we paskin. We know that there's a sheet out there. Halacha kamoso, and even if you want to say it's like Rabbi ben Beseira, we still would have to be forced to ask the question again. Wait, when you say the halacha zakim, did you mean ben Nisuin or Afilu b'Kiddushin? Which one is it? We don't know. All these different iterations. Tashma, the Gemara says halfway down, 3 lines into the wide lines. Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel, halacha Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, halacha mechalal de pligi. So that's one part of the question answered, is that it does seem, based on the opening line of this Gemara, that when the Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel says that the halachas are this is Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, that when we say that the halachas are Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, obviously someone is arguing on it. V'akati, you didn't answer my other question. Tibaylach, the question should still stand. When she was with Chaim, the husband with whom we were discussing whether or not the miyun was chal. Was she fully married to Chaim, or was she only engaged to Chaim? Tashma says the Gemara, to Kalse de Avdan Imrod. The daughters-in-law of Avdan is a person, Imrod, they rebelled. They were married to Imrod's children, Imrod's sons, but only midrabanan. So Shadar Rebbe Zugi de Rabbanan Lemibdekinu. Rebbe sent some rabbis to go check and see what the story was with these women. And Amre Lahu, he said to them, Noshe, he said to these women, Chazu Guvraichu Dekasu, the men are on their way back home. So the girls all piped up and almost in unison said, Amre Lahu, they said to the rabbis, Nehabu Guvraichu Didchu, the men are yours. We're not interested in them. So says the Gemara, Amar Rebbe in the Chamiyun Gadol Mizeh. Beautiful. This is aggressive. This isn't even passive aggressive. That we don't keep them. The men around the way, keep them. We're not interested at all. Wow. Says the Gemara, Ein Gadol Mizeh. So says the Gemara, my love, but wasn't this the case to have an Asiva where they were married initially? And that we see that miyun does work even in this case. Look, to have a mikdash shakdusha was only kedushin. And behalacha kribuda b'mesera, I feel been the kam. The Gemara paskins like kribuda b'mesera that even had she been fully married to Chaim and she turned around and asked Yaakov to propose to her, and he did, they are halachically married, and the miyun is chal. Wow. All right, 8 lines into the wide lines, middle width lines. The Gemara says, Rabbi Lazar Omer, what was going on with Rabbi Lazar in our Mishnah? Rabbi Lazar was in our Mishnah, was the one who said, Ein ma'aseh ketana klum elakim afuta, that a child, that their activities are nothing. So let's get into this sugya. Am Rabbi Yudam Shmuel, Chozrani al kol tzadei chachamim. I've looked at all the shitas. V'lumatzasi adam shehishve midosa b'ktana ki Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Lazar is the most consistent person with his shita as it relates to a ktana. Sha'asa Rabbi Lazar kimetayela simo b'chatzer ve'omedes micheko v'toveles ve'ocheles b'truma le'erev. An unbelievable dramatic display of events. She's strolling with him b'chatzer ve'omedes micheko. She could be intimate with him and then walk away from him v'toveles, and then ve'ocheles b'truma le'erev, and then she can eat truma at night if she's a bas kohen. Rashi details all the case here. But the point is that he is very consistent that it is a zero. Whatever happens with this girl is a zero. No miyun, no nothing, no nothing. It's nothing. Nothing. She's a bas kohen. They can have tashva shemitah. She can go to the mikvah. When the sun sets, she's allowed to eat truma again. Tanya Rabbi Eliezer Omer ein ma'aseh ketana klum, similar to our Mishnah, ve'ein baila zakai. And because the ma'aseh ketana is nothing, therefore her husband is not going to be zakai. He will not be able to get lo b'mitziyasa, her lost items, lo b'maisiyadeh, her proceeds, her financial proceeds, lo b'hafaras tadareh. He cannot undo her vows. Ve'ena yorsha ve'ena matamila. Nor can he inherit what used to be hers if she dies. And ve'ena matamila, he's not really a husband that he can be matame for her if she dies. Klalo shel davar. Here's the rule. Eino ki ishto l'chol davar elo shetzricha miyun. Really, Lemaisa, this Ketana is a zero in regards to her activities with this husband. They don't matter, except for one technical piece is that she needs miyun. Otherwise, he's consistent across the board. He's the most consistent shita out there. That is what the Brisa says. However, Rabbi Yeshua Omer, a little bit differently. Baila, her husband, this girl's husband, is zakai b'mitziyas of ma'aseh zeva first. He says that no, she is really a wife, and he does get, therefore, her lost items, her financial proceeds. He can undo her vows, and he gets a yerusha if she dies. And mitamila, he can go to the cemetery and bury her if she dies as well. Klalo shel davar. Rabbi Yeshua is the exact opposite. He's really like a wife in every way, with one exception, is that it's not a regular get that divorces them, but rather miyun. So there's basically this 180 degrees opposite view of this young girl from Rabbi Lazar on the one hand, who says that ein ma'aseh ketana klum, and Rabbi Yeshua, who says no, she's a full wife. Huge nafkamin is l'maisa in regards to how we view this particular girl. I'm a Rebbe. Rebbe says, how do we paskin in regards to this machlokas, Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Yeshua? Rebbe says 4 lines into the widest lines. Kuf chesed base, 12 lines from the bottom. I'm a Rebbe. Near and divrei Rabbi Eliezer, mi de Rabbi Yeshua. I agree with Rabbi Eliezer more. Rabbi Eliezer hishve midosa biktana of Rabbi Yeshua chilek. Rabbi Eliezer was consistent across the boards, and Rabbi Yeshua, he was chilek. He said that things really were not right. What did he say? My chilek, ishto hiti by get. Rabbi Yeshua had this strange dichotomy. Yeah, you're fully married, but you don't have to give a get. Why? If you're fully married, give a get. Well, what's the strange splitting from the theme? If you're saying she's married, if you're a Kohen, you can become tameh for her if she dies, but you don't have to give her a get. Why is me insufficient? So says the Gemara, you're right. But then if that's true, that Rabbi Yoshua has a stira, Rabbi Eliezer also has a stira. Rabbi Eliezer nami, ilav ishto hi miyun nami lo tibai. If Rabbi Eliezer is right, and he really was consistent across the boards, that this woman, this girl, I should say, is a zero, and ein ma'aseh ketana klum, then why even do miyun? They're not married. They're not married in any way, shape, and form. Even if she were to be a kohenes, she could go home that night and she can eat truma. So therefore, we see that they're not married. So why does he need to do anything? Says the Gemara, no, that's not right. She's got to do something in order to get out of the marriage. So we require miyun. But really, Rabbi Eliezer is most consistent. Next two dots, 10, 11 lines from the bottom. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Omer, what was going on in the Mishnah when he said that? Take a look at the Mishnah on Kuv Zayin Amid Beis. And Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov said this very difficult line of kol ikva shehim min ha'ish, that if a woman is held up in her marriage because of the man, then it's as if they're married. So let's dig into this. Heichi Dami, says the Gemara, what is the case of ikva shehim min ha'ish, ikva she'ena min ha'ish? That if a woman is in the marriage due to her connection to the husband, then she does require miyun to get out of the marriage. And if she's not in the marriage for him, then she doesn't need to do miyun. So it says the Gemara, if somebody goes over to her while she's married to Chaim and says, can you marry Yaakov? And her answer is going to be the telling evidence. Let's see. The Amra machmas ploni baili, I can't marry Yaakov because I'm married to Chaim. So if she says that, zohi akva shehimi na'ish, that's where the woman is held into the marriage by her feelings for this man, and therefore miyun would be required. However, if she responded when they said to her, I know you're married to Chaim, but would you like to marry Yaakov? And she says, machmas b'nei adam she'enin mehugananli, well, I would have considered it, but you tossed up someone that I'm not interested in, maybe a little bit better looking, a little bit richer, whatever the case may be, then zohi akva she'ena min ha'ish, and then no miyun is required at all. She's obviously not married. Similar to the previous someone at the top of the page where ein miyun gadol mizeh. She's like, yep, oh, is that guy available? Oh, that would be great. Okay, great. So that would be an indicator that no miyun is required. Abaye bar Avin, Rav Chanina bar Avin, they were brothers. De'amrei tarvai, they both said the following line: Nosan lo get. If a man gives a woman a get, zohi akva she'imi na'ish, that's an indicator that they're in a real relationship. And therefore, once that get is given, v'hu aser b'krovoseha, the husband can no longer be with her family members, v'hi aser b'krovav, nor can she be with his, upasla mina kahuna, and she would then lose her status as a kohen because of her status of having been with this man. Mianabo, however, if there was only miyun, zohi akva she'ini min ha'ish, that shows that their relationship really wasn't anything. V'hu mutar b'krovoseha, and then it's permissible for him to marry her relatives and vice versa. Says the Gemara, why did these two Amoraim bother to say that? We have a Mishnah coming up, and actually this Mishnah is on the next line. It's just good proximity. Says the Gemara, we had this exact line, and the Mishnah and 2 lines from now will say the same thing. And as well, so why is it that the Amora literally mimicked and copied the Mishnah? It's the same exact thing. Says the Gemara, Prushe Kamefar. She does add a little bit of color to what's going on, and because of that, he repeated the line. But it was meant to be in line with the Mishnah, not really with great additions, just with subtle additions. That brings us to sure.
And the psula for the kahuna, is that mashma that there wasn't any tashmish?
Can you say that again? Sorry, my brain just broke in the middle of you talking. Sorry.
So it says that she's not puzzle to a kohen, right?
In a case of miyun, right?
So is that mashma that there wasn't any tashmish? Because what's the actual isser for the kohen?
First of all, maybe the miyun was only by kedushin. Good question. I don't know. It could. The simplest answer is that they never had tashmish shemitah. Otherwise, she's a zona.
But latafka, because she was in a marriage.
Was she? What does the miyun do? The miyun says that it was right.
It makes a proof
Which is a big problem.
Only for anything else, I just say.
Could a regular kohen marry a divorcee?
Ben Grusha ben Chalutza, pasuk and chumash. An almana is its own isser, but that's
No, almana can't other than front up.
right. No, I'm saying for a kohen gadol, it's a separate.
So
restriction.
you're saying it'd be.
That's a good question. I assumed the case was just talking about kedushin when you asked your question, but I don't know.
And is this, and then therefore when she gets married, is it me'azuz or is it still masai?
That's basula be'ula. We differentiate on a ksuba only based on that, and today we don't even differentiate. But
No, I understand. We're talking 1500 years.
right, yeah. Well, it's a Mishnah even more, 2000. But yeah, but it was basula be'ula. If she had tashmish, I mean, the kedushin alone is not going to minimize That's like mekach tos sugya. It's like we're going to learn that in Ksubas, Pesach, Pasach, Matzasi. Like if they were together on the first night and he notices that she doesn't have a basulim, so he can say it. I didn't purchase a beula. Purchase.
I
I didn't
remember
marry.
hearing that a Baal Tshuva who has relations with a non-Jew cannot marry a Kohen, but if it's relations with a Jew, can marry a Kohen. I thought I heard that suck. So based on that, it's just
Some of these sugyas were learned already. We learned some of these. I don't remember all the answers, but don't know. All right, let's get to the new Mishnah. We have Marav in a half hour. Says the Gemara, this is a quote of exactly what we just learned, the case the text was asking about, a case where there was miyun that was done. That basically it's as if nothing ever happened and everyone is fine. Nasan lo get. No, maybe Rashi here speaks about this. Rashi says that's in a case of a get.
Right. It's like, yeah, it's not me.
Correct. I don't even know if Rashi. Let's get there. Hold on 1 second. And then third line from the bottom. Nasan lo get who asur b'krovo sev he asur b'krovo pas min kahuna. Okay, so Rashi doesn't speak about our case, unfortunately. Another iteration, another permutation of this relationship, and we'll see that there's a big back and forth here. Let's say that a man is nasan lo get, and then v'hichzira, and then he remarries her, and then miyanabo v'nises la'acher. So there's a get. Ruvain and Rachel were married. Ruvain gives Rachel a get, and then he remarries her b'chazira, and then she does miyun. Miyanabo, she walks away from him. V'nises la'achar v'nis armalo niskarsha. She marries another man, and that man dies or divorces her. Muteres lachzor lo. She's allowed to go back to the original marriage. Oh, what about miyanabo? Let's say that Ruvain that Rachel does miyun to Ruvain, then they get married again, and then nasan lo get, and then it's just reversed, and then he gives her a get, then she marries another man, and then in the second marriage, the husband dies, she gets widowed or divorced, one of the two, asur lachzor bo. So we had said in the first case, get first, miyun later, she can go back to him, miyun first and get later, no. And says the Gemara on the top of Kuf Ches Amud Beis, this exact idea. This is the general principle. Get achar miyun asur lachzor bo. If you have to get after miyun, they're not allowed to get back together. Miyun achar get, but if the miyun was second, then muteres lachzor bo. The Mishnah continues with a complex case, one that is subject to a discussion in the Girsa here. It's not so clear exactly. As you can see, there's a bunch of olives here. This requires a little bit of work, but we're going to read the pashtus of our Mishnah. Hamima enes beish. Let's say that a woman does miyun to a man, then she marries another man and gets divorced. Then la'acher, she marries another man, umiyanabo, and she does miyun to him, and then la'acher begirsha yet again. Zehaklal, what's the rule? Kol sheyotza hemenu beged. Any woman who leaves a man with a get, asur lachzor bo, but b'miyun muteres lachzor lo. Very difficult Mishnah. We'll hopefully get to the bottom of this by the time we get to the bottom of the page. Says the Gemara, Alma, what do we see from our Mishnah? This last zehaklal that we saw taught us, Alma asi miyun mavatel get. We see that if a miyun is second, then it undoes the get, and therefore she can be machzir, because normally you have an issur of machzir grushasa. The first case, the case that was 3 lines from the bottom of on Kuf Ches Amud Aleph was a case where a woman married another man in the meantime, and we still allowed her to go back to him. How is that possible? It says the Gemara. We see from here that the miyun undoes the get. Otherwise, it would be machzor grushasa. However, that doesn't seem to be so simple, because 6 lines down, the Gemara presents a source in the Tanaim that doesn't agree with the diuk from our Mishnah. This is a quote from our Mishnah. The inference from the Reisha, in other words, the inference from the Reisha, the Alma, is a steer to the Seifa of the Mishnah, where it says Mimanes. And what does it say? Zaklal. Kol sheyatza himenu beget. Kol sheyatza himenu beget. Any woman whose relationship was severed with a get, asur lachzor bo. But b'miyun muteres lachzor lo. What does that teach us? The latter case in the Mishnah teaches us Alma lo asimiyun dechavrei ubatel gita didei. So it says the Gemara, we have a stira of the implication of the Reisha and the implication of the Seifa. Do we say, like the Reisha seems to imply, that miyun can undo a get, which allows a woman to go back to her husband, even if she's been married to someone else in between, or do we not say that? Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, you're absolutely right. Tavra, the Mishnah is broken. Shavur, Mishnah is broken. Misha shanazu lo shanazu. The Reisha and the Seifa were not authored by the same people. It's impossible, because the implications of the Reisha and the Seifa don't fit. Amar Rava, not necessarily. My kushya, I don't even understand your difficulty. They're talking about 2 different cases. What are the 2 cases? Maybe when it comes to one husband remarrying his own wife, and he's the one who did the miyun, and he's the one who gave the get. So in that case, the miyun is mevatel again. But miyun dechavrei lo mevatel gita didei. But when it comes that miyun for one person and get with another man, then maybe that's when the Mishnah would say that it doesn't work. Why would you then say that if a friend does miyun after you do get, that it doesn't nullify the get? Because when a woman is in a relationship with the new man, but she's been exposed to her husband for a long time, she's got the body language down. 70% of communication is nonverbal. Says the Gemara, a woman knows. She knows her husband's subtleties, and she'll be able to see it on his face that she may want to get back, that he may want to get back together with her. And then Azal Meshabeshu Maisila, and he can go and try to appease her to join him. And then maybe she'll leave that husband. We don't want that to happen, so we don't allow in that case for miyun to be mevatel again. But miyun didei nami lo levatel gita didei. Maybe we should, we can't say in regards to himself that the miyun and the get should be mevatel one another. You can't say the same thing. Why not? Because he already tried to convince her to stay with him, and she wasn't interested. So therefore, there is a valid difference between the Reisha and the Seifa, not one that leaves us in the scenario of Tavra, of a broken Mishnah. And therefore, the Gemara says, halfway down on Kufches and Beis, Ali Kasha, if in fact you're going to find a stira, I'll give you a stira, but it's not the one that you said. The stira that we have now is the Chavrei Kasha, both about the friends, the second husband. Here is the stira. Source number one, halfway down, Kufches and Beis. Mianabo, Vichzira, Nosan Loget, Venises La'acher, Venis Armala on Nisgarsha. Let's get the case down. So Rachel does miyun to Ruvain, Vichzira, and then they get married again. And then Ruvain is Nosan Loget, gives her a get. So now this couple has had a rocky marriage. They've had one miyun and one get. They should go to couples therapy. And then she marries another man, and that man either dies or divorces her. The halacha is asura lachzor lo. She's not allowed to go back to him. What is the reason why that happened? Why it's true that she cannot go back? Taima is dinis armala onis garsha, because that second husband died and left her a widow, onis garsha, or she was divorced. But had he not died, had she done miyun to that second husband, then muteris lachzor lo. And what does that teach us? Alma asimiyun dechavre mevatel gita didei. We see that there is a case scenario where the miyun of a friend can be mevatel, even the husband's initial get. But that doesn't work with another source about the Chabre, which is our Mishnah. This case was presented in our Mishnah. What did we say? We said that when it comes to the get, if a woman ended her marriage with a get, then she cannot go back to her husband. But b'miyun, if in fact the marriage ended b'miyun, then she is allowed to go back to her husband. Muteris lachzor bo. Alma, what do we see from this second source? Lo asimiyun dechabre mevatel gita didei. So we have a stira. We have a stira between these two mishnayos, and the Gemara presents a couple of answers to this stira. 2/3 of the way down, Kufches and Beis. Amar Rabbi Elazar Tavra. You're right. This is also broken. Yishashanazu lo shanazu. Whoever taught one of these lines cannot possibly be the author of the other. However, Ula Amar, no, it's not true. There's a difference between the two cases. One is Kigon Sheshilsha Begittin Demechsia Kigdola. In one case, a girl had so many divorces, everybody knows she appears to be like Kigdola, so we're going to be more strict. That's the distinction in the cases. Asks the Gemara 3/4 of the way down, Mantana. We don't know what this is talking about. We've had like 5 brises on the page. What do you mean Mantana? Who's the author of the brisa? So take a look at Rashi halfway down on the page, Dibur Hamaschal Mantana. And Rashi, thankfully, helps us to understand what's going on in the Gemara. Rashi says, Man Tana de Amran La'el. Who is the Tana above that says, Misha Shana Zu, Lo Shana Zu? Who is the author of the contrasting Tana, the contrasting brisa? So says the Gemara, I'll tell you a little bit of a drasha, and then you'll see shortly who this person is. Amar Rav Yehuda Marav. My dichsiv, what does the pasuk mean when it says, Mimino bekesef shasinu, atzenu b'mechir yavo, our silver we will drink, and the wood will be at a cost. B'shas hasakana nizbaksha halachazu. We had a halachic question that was raised at a particular time, and we needed to ask a shaila to a great rav. What was the shaila? Hareshi yatza meirishon beget umisheni b'miyun. This was the stira of Chavre de Chavre. So the Gemara is framing out our question exactly like it is. The problem is that the Gadol Hador Rabbi Akiva was in jail. So they paid to go gain access. Scharo Adam, they rented someone Adam echad be'arba me'ozuz, which is of course the Gemara's hyperbolic language for a heck of a lot of money. That's just a lot. That was the story from, I think we learned this, the Gemara where at a wedding there was too much simcha and they broke up 400 zuz. Was that we learned that already?
No,
It's in the future? Oh.
It might have been wrong. So
It was referenced somewhere, I think. Yeah. Okay, I don't remember where it is. But the Gemara says they hired this guy for $400. V'shalu es Rabbi Akiva b'beis asur and v'asar. He said it's asur. He said they're not allowed to be together. Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi lezu lo hutzrachnu. Right? Oh, sorry, I skipped a line. V'asar as Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira ben Etzivin. They also went to Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira and also v'asar. Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi lezu lo hutzrachnu. I just today was speaking to my Rebbe. I asked a shaila to him, one of my Rebbeim in Eretz Yisrael. And he said this line: when you go up to Shamayim after 120 years, please God, Kodesh Baruch Hu is going to say, when you made your decisions, were they done b'das Torah? You don't always know what the snowball effect is of asking the Shiloh. You don't have no idea. So he said, you'll be able to say, you asked a Shiloh, you got an answer. You're going to be a big boy and try to keep what I'm telling you, which is not so simple, But he's saying that's how it works. So they had to pay the big bucks to get to the Gadol Hador. Okay.
why did they then go to the Yehuda ben Beseira?
I don't know. The Gemara doesn't.
Like, if Rabbi Akiva's in jail and it's too difficult, so fine. If they went and spent all the money.
It seems that I assume the rental was for both of them. It says v'sha'alu. Oh no, sha'alu's on them.
Yeah.
Why would you ask the same question of two different Gedolim?
Right.
Isn't that a problem?
Well, that's really a problem. I guess the problem leads us to different things, but.
Right, but once you get upset, that's the psak.
Yeah, we don't go shopping, but that's not what was happening here. I just don't know what was. It wasn't that. It wasn't like, Rebbe shopping. I'm sure there's too much integrity.
They're asking what each of their Masoras will feel.
Yeah, that's a fine answer. Yeah. Okay. Amar Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yossi, that can't be. L'zula hutzrachnu. You don't need to spend 400 zuz on that. There's no way that's the question that they asked Rabbi Akiva. Why? Because the Isser Kares hitarta, the Isser Lav lo kol shekain. Of course, this would be allowed. Rashi explains what's going on 2/3 of the way down. The Isser Kares, Isser Eshes Ish hivkata mimena below get. Alma ein ma'aser shelo klum. We let this girl get out with just a miyun. L'Isser Lav the machzer grushasa lo kol shekain. The galik diktana below have a gita klum. So we don't need to ask that shayla. That's a simple shayla. That's you don't. It's like when you go to this was a famous Maisa with her Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. This kid was chewing gum, and he had this whole shaila, what's the bracha on gum? And the father wanted to be a mechanech, so he brought the kid to Rav Shlomo Zalman, and he said to Rav Shlomo Zalman, Rebbe, what bracha do you make on gum? And Rav Shlomo Zalman he starts pulling svarim off the shelves. He's flipping through the pages. Agan's shaila, it's beautiful shaila. It's just a beautiful chinuch, So he said that can't be the question. It had to be a different question. Let's get back in the Gemara here. And the Gemara says, what was the question? Baram kach shalu. This is the question that they asked Rabbi Akiva. Hare ha'isa eshes achi imo shishnielo. Let's say that you have a man's mother's brother's wife, who is a shnias of arayos to a particular man. What is that? Your mother's brother's wife, it's your aunt through marriage. So says the Gemara, in that case, that woman to me would be an Isser D'Rabbanan. It's a Shniya. And Vinasa, there was a marriage there. She married Achiv Me'aviv. She married his father's brother, Umeis. Is she allowed to uproot her whole marriage in order to do Yibum? Do we allow Miyun after death in a scenario where there's a mitzvah? Yes or no? More complicated question. So then there's Schar Shnei Bnei Adam. Did it say Shnei Bnei Adam before? No. It might be a correction here. Yeah, Adam Echad, it's corrected. Adam Echad, Ba'arba Me'al Zuz, Ubav Sha'alu, Es Rabbi Akiva, V'es Hashem, V'asar, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, ben Etzivin, V'asar. Amar Yitzchak bar Ashian, Umode Rav does agree, Shemuteres la'achiv shel zeh, Shene Esra alav, that it's muter la'achiv shel zeh, the brother of this person, she is allowed to be with. Ask the Gemara Pshita, that should be obvious. It's only the husband where she knows the body language, where there's a temptation that maybe she would leave her husband to go back to him. She should not know her brother's body language that well. Maybe we would say we should be gozer in the case of the brother because of the husband. That's not true. The reverse. Just like she's asur to the husband because he has all the body language down, we're afraid she's going to convince that he'll convince her to leave her second husband. And so too to the brother. How can you say that the brother should be aser? The brother of the husband doesn't have the same body language. Says the Gemara, that there is in fact some machlokas in the Gemara how we would conclude with that. One more Mishnah in Gemara will bring us to the Mishnah 2/3 of the way down in Kuftes. Let's get started. We're on the last line of Kufches Amud Beis. Says the Mishnah, Hamigarish es ishto v'chzira, Ruvain divorces Rachel and remarries her, and then Ruvain dies. Muteres liyavam. She is allowed to marry the yavam. That's very interesting because it's a big chiddush because she was divorced from Ruvain, so now she becomes.
But she's still his wife when he dies.
Hanami, but there was a divorce. So the Gemara is going to discuss this, that there was a time when they were usher to one another. Because when she's divorced, you can't marry, even with a divorce, you can't marry your sister-in-law. With a divorce of a man and his wife, you can't marry the sister-in-law. So it is a chiddush. And in fact, Rabbi Elazar Oser, and the Gemara says, time of Mefarish B'Gemara, and we'll get to that shortly. Top line of Kuf Testament Aleph, a man who divorces a Yisoma, v'hechzir, and remarries him, muteres liyavam, the same would be true there, that they can remarry. Rashi gives us the context of what's going on here. The second Rashi on the page, top line, the Ramaskal b'chenim agarshe. Soma Ketana, she's a young girl, she's siwa ima ve'achea, v'hechzira. This is talking about a case where the mother and the father had died. It has to be Kiddushin Derabanan, and she's considered a Yisoma because her father died. And in that case, while they hold it's Mutar Siyavam, Rabbi Elazar Oser, he says it's not allowed. We'll get into this in the Gemara. Ketanashi Siyua Aviha V'Niskarsha. Let's say that there was a girl whose father married her off. That's a Kiddushin Deoraisa. That's what we said earlier. That's the big distinction. If a father marries off a daughter, that Kiddushin is Deoraisa. If the mother and the brother do, that Kiddushin is only Derabanan. So this girl's a Ketanashi Siyua Aviha V'Niskarsha, a young girl got married at her father's hand and got divorced. So then the halacha is ki yasoma b'chayav. She's like a yasoma while her father is still alive. What the Mefarshim explain here is that, and Rashi says this, is that she's like a yasoma and that the father cannot remarry her to somebody else. He no longer has the power to generate kedushin for once she's been divorced. If in fact she gets back into that marriage, if she goes back into that initial marriage, everyone agrees that she would be asur liyavam. Amar Efa. Efa is a person. Rashi says Shem Chacham. Amar Efa. My time of the Rebbe Lazar. Why is it the Rebbe Lazar so makbid in our Mishnah? In the case of Megarish as Ishto B'Echzira, if Reuven and Rachel were married and then they were divorced and then they got remarried, we still say Muteres Liyavam. Why would he say it's Aser? Hol v'amda alav sha'achas be'isura. Because there was a moment when there was a divorce. When Reuven and Rachel get divorced, even though they get remarried again, but because they got divorced once during that period of divorce, then Rachel's not allowed to marry Shimon. That's not allowed. So therefore, the Gemara says, even though now they got back together, but because there was a moment of Isser, Sha'achas be'isura, therefore they cannot marry.
But technically speaking, I mean, why is that Sha'achas of Isser any different than the time that she's married to him? That of course is yes.
What?
She's married to Reuven, right?
Oh no, because the Torah gives a matir of Yibum.
Correct, but why?
But the matir of Yibum, it's a separate Isser for them.
Why is those moments of Isser are so stronger than a marriage?
The bond is broke.
Hold on one second. You're saying
No, I
that?
understand the Torah gives a matir.
Yeah, but that's the
Because
Hakira.
they have this man of Isser. The whole time is this man of Isser. It's slightly different Isser.
Significantly different Isser,
So
right? That's
why
what
is
Gemara is
that
saying.
Isser
That's
stronger?
okay. That's a fair
Which
question.
I think is probably what you were asking.
You're asking the underbelly of Shitas Rebbe Lazar, like why do we say that the fact that there was a gerushin? Right?
Yes,
So,
that's
I
exactly
understand,
what
right?
I'm asking.
So that's exactly right. So let's see. I don't know if Rashi speaks
The
about this.
bond is cut. It's like she's free, isn't it?
She's free except to him.
Well, what Gerald could be saying is that the principle of Yibum, the Zika, is now messed up. The Zika is messed up because once there was a divorce, in a classical boring case, Reuven's married to Rachel, Reuven dies, good to go. But if it's Reuven was married to Rachel, Reuven gets divorced from Rachel, Reuven remarries Rachel, and then he dies. So the Zika has been messed around. It's tainted. Right, that would be the lumdus to say.
Maybe, I don't know. Why.
Or the Isser of marrying a divorced, right? The divorce Rachel, for the Isser of Shimon marrying Rachel is a different Isser than the Isser of the sister-in-law Isser because the sister-in-law Isser has a matir. we have this principle, lavanita class say. It's like, it's not I'm not saying that it applies here. Yeah, but it has a matir,
Clearly has a
Yeah,
matir, yeah,
But
but
the Matthias is that she's his wife when he dies.
Right.
That's the
Right.
Matthias.
why is that?
What do
What
you-
happened back there so strong to ruin simple facts, like you're saying?
The Zika is cut off.
Mhm.
You may be right. You may be right. I don't know why that would be.
Take a look at Rashi, the second Rashi on the Gemara. Rashi, quarter of the way down, the Raschal Sha'achas, Be'isr Grushas Achiv Shehi Bekaris.
So.
It's a
is
bit of a
there
non
just
sequitur.
A Kares, but regular.
You can't look at Eshes Achiv in a regular way. It's
Let's
not
say-
apples to
let's say he
apples.
died in Hampshire, and the brother marries her. That's not a Kares, right? He died, there was no Yibum.
It's Eshes- it's Eshes-
It's only a lot, so that's probably the answer.
It's La versus Karis.
Mom versus Kares. That Rashi is probably the
Well,
answer.
I have a feeling that what Gerald is saying might well be true in Lumdus as well, that something has affected the Zika. It could be. I don't have any Marmakomas for it, but it seems that way.
You can't unring that bell.
You can't-
Right. Okay, so it says the Gemara, that's the Svara of Rebbe Lazar. And the Gemara responds, Amr le Rabbanan le'efa, Ihachi, if that's true, Chalitza, Nami, Lo Tibai, then there would be case scenarios when even Chalitza would not be required. This is referencing one of the cases in our Mishnah. Yeah, V'hechzira divrei hakol asur liyavam. So the Gemara says that even over there, Chalitza Nami Lo Tibai. It says the Gemara, that's not true. That says, so Ella, Amar Efa, you're right, I retract. Rabbi Lazar lo yadana my time. He pulls away his answer because there's a complication with the thoroughness of his answer. So Amar Abaye, he gives the second of four answers. Amar Abaye, Hainu Tamad Rabbi Lazar, Misafkale, Imisa Mapeles, Inisuan Harishonim Mapilim. Do we look at the moment where death takes place to determine eligibility of Yibum, or do we look at when they first got married to determine eligibility of Yibum? Imisa Mapeles, last short line. If in fact we look at the moment of death, Haram Yakameli Yibum, so then perfect, there should be Yibum. But in Nisuan Harishonim Mapilim, if we're looking at the first marriage, Amdalav Shah Achas Be'isr. It's a similar answer to the first one, but more sophisticated, more rich, because it's the lumdus is on a different nakuda. It's not on the lumdus like Rabbi Lazar was saying in like the first answer of the Gemara. It's not like that. Here, what we're talking about is where's the moment in time where we determine eligibility for yibum. That's a different question. And therefore, because if we look at the marriage itself, and because there was a divorce at that marriage, the marriage has a flaw in it, and therefore, amda alav shachas biser. That's answer number 2. Answer number 3, Rava Amar La'olam, Pshita Rabbi Lazar de Misa Mapeles. Everybody knows that it's Misa Mapeles. We always look at the moment of death. Umiu hakol bekin begerushin, ve'ein hakol bekin bechazara. Wow, really, Medina, technically, there's no difference at all. But we're makbed because really people don't know the halachos of chazara. We're sitting here being done about the issue of grushas achiv, that it's kares. Now we don't even know what we're talking about. People don't, we know what a regular gerushin is. We know what a regular get is. So the Gemara says, really, technically, you're right. It should be the case that Rabbi Lazar shouldn't be osir, but he is osir. Why is he osir? Because we're dealing with a case of chazara, of remarrying the wife, and those cases of ein hakol bekin b'chazara. Says the Gemara, not true. 3 lines into the Y lines, adarabba. Chazra, when they remarry, came under Yosva Tuesday, since they're living in the same house, Isle Kala. Oh my gosh, did you hear that they got married? Oh, they're married again. Oh, Batzlacha, Hashem should bless them. Fine. Build a bayis nam b'Yisrael. But the Gemara says that it should be obvious. Why are you saying that people don't know the laws of Chazara? They're living in the same house. We all know that they got remarried. So it says the Gemara, Milo askinan da'ahadra be'orta v'shachid b'tzafra. We could easily have a case where they got married on a Tuesday and he died on a Wednesday, and we're going to be all confused. So that's answer number 3, rejected. And then the Gemara goes to answer number 4, 4 lines into the Y lines. Ravashi Amar Hainu Taimad Rabbi Lazar. The Gazar Hani Mishum Yisoma B'chaya Avech Zira. We were gozer on the earlier cases in the Mishnah, the first 2 cases, because of the latter 2 cases of the Mishnah. And Achanami Mistabra, this is reasonable to assume, in the Katani Seifa, because what does the Seifa say? We said that if there's a young girl who her father married her off, namely the Kedushin is Doraisa, and then Vinis Garsha, and she gets divorced, the halacha is that she's Kiyasoma B'chaya Ha'ab. The halacha is that she's like the Yesoma. It's as if her father isn't there anymore, which is code word for her father is not able to marry her to yet another man. And our Mishnah continues, and if she gets remarried again, then everyone agrees that the Yavam, that she could not get married by Yibum in that case. Says the Gemara, Hi Maila Memra, why did we need our Mishnah to say this pshita? It should be obvious. There's no reason to say anything that's so obvious like that. We therefore see the Rebbe Lazar in the two cases of the Reish of our Mishnah was only generating a gzera because of the end of our Mishnah. And Tanya Kavasi the Ravashi, the Brisa agrees. The Chachamim agreed to Rebbe Lazar in the case of a young girl who got married at the hand of her father, which is a kedushin d'oraisa, and then v'niskarsha, and that she got divorced. That her father is not allowed to marry her to another man. If a woman gets remarried, and everyone agrees to that as well. Gerushin Gemurin, Vein Chazarasa, Chazara Gemura. Because yes, it's true that her Gerushin was the real deal, but her Chazara was not a very strong Chazara because her father wasn't the one doing it. What is the case of this brisa that supports Rav Ashi? That's only true if her gerushin was when she was before bar mitzvah and her remarriage was before she got bas mitzvah. Aval, both bas mitzvahs, not bar. Sorry. Aval girshak shiktana. If she got divorced when she was a child, and she went back to this husband after she was a gadol. Inami shiktana. The gadlo etzlo umes, or really the chazara was before she became a gadol, but then she became a gadol and then he died. So the halacha should be o choletzes o bisyabemes. And mishum Rebbe Lazar amru choletzes v'lo bisyabemes. That's not either or; it's choletzes only. Says the Gemara. One last question, a little quick back and forth, and then we'll stop at the new Mishnah. B'aminei Rav Amir Rav Nachman. What if this woman had a tzara samahu? Amar leim. Rav Nachman says back to Rava, that's not a real good question. Amarle, he gufa gzer. The whole scenario we're talking about is a din derabanan. We're going to add a whole nother layer. The whole din with this girl is derabanan. We're going to say that her tzara is going to be trapped as well. No, we're not. Tanya, the Brisa writes, Rabbi Lazar Amr, how can you say that he v'tzarasa cholatzes? The Brisa writes that he v'cholatza, she and her tzara will be cholatzes. Says the Gemara, both of them. It cannot be true that both of them are. Well, at least one of them should have yibum. It should be ohi o tzarasa cholemes. One of the two. Says the Gemara that if you want to use that as a raya that we have a din by a tzara, you can't do that. Lav trutze kamatarzis. Didn't you just have to reword this Mishnah? You had to answer up the Mishnah to make everything fit. If that's true, it's not a good marimakom because I could easily reinterpret the Mishnah. Taritzachi. I could say he choletzes and tzarasa o choletzes o misyabemes. Once we're rewording the Mishnah, I could reword the Mishnah however I want. So you wanted to ask, whether or not we have a brisa that's a raya for the tzara. We don't have a brisa that's a raya for the tzara, and therefore, seemingly from the Gemara, we cannot bring a raya whatsoever in regards to a tzara, and we would presume from here that she would have no halachic connection to this sugya at all because it would be a gzera l'gzera. We'll stop right here at this Mishnah, 2/3 of the way down. We'll pick up on Shabbos. I believe Daf Yomi is at 7:00. Wishing you all a beautiful night.
I have a question. I can't remember if we talked about this.